So, dear students, I welcome you to my class on Things Fall Apart. We had our introductory class in the last week. And in our introductory class, we came to know a lot of things about African literature, about the origin of African literature and the colonial experiences of the natives of Africa. And I also discussed how the Africans developed their literature in encounter with the advent of colonialism. And I also told you that the Africans went through an evolution process of their orature. That is how orature was evolutionized into literature. I told you all these things in my last class. And today I like to introduce the text, Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. This very text is called a pioneering text of modern African literature. And it was produced in 1958, just 2 years before the independence of Nigeria. But you must not think that this was the first text in written form of African literature. The thing is not like this. Before Chinua Achebe, we got some more writers in Africa who used to write in English. Suppose Agunwa, then Sol Plaatji, and some other writers, for example, Amos Tutuola. These writers started writing in English. But you must know that English was not the language of the Africans. The Africans were divided into different ethnic groups and they had their own individual languages. But they did not have a lingua franca. So while the colonizers went to Africa with their languages and they imposed their languages upon the local people for the convenience of their enterprise of maximizing their profit. Actually, I have told you that colonization process was a process of maximizing capital. It was a capitalizing process. It was not a civilizing mission. Though the colonizers went on with this propaganda to brainwash the world, but actually they played the hypocritical role of maximizing their profit. So while this process was going on, that is the process of capitalizing, the process of maximizing their capital, they, for their convenience, wanted to introduce a common language, a lingua franca, so that they could communicate with different ethnic groups of people. They wanted to be comprehensible to the local people. For that reason, they imposed their language. They introduced their curriculum in the local schools. They also introduced their Bible, that is their religion, Christianity. So why did they do so? They did all these things for their benefit, not for the benefit of the Africans. Remember this. Though superficially they promulgated that they were doing all these things for the convenience of the Africans, actually they did not do so. They did all these things for their own convenience. But the process of colonization created knowledge among the natives. You know it from Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault, in his Archaeology of Knowledge, has said that the exercise of power creates knowledge. Suppose you torture a man every day, or you torture your subordinate every day. You continue torturing him, and torturing him. In course of time, you will find that that very man is posing a resistance to you. That is, he is using your epistemology, your knowledge, against your authority. That is called the generation of knowledge. Suppose think of our history, the history of this subcontinent. For 200 years, the English colonizers exercised hegemony here upon the people. They introduced their curriculum. They also introduced their language. They attempted to annihilate our culture and cultural identity. But ultimately, what happened? Ultimately, in 1947, we dropped them away out of this territory. So they exercised power, and with the exercise of this power, they produced Jawaharlal Nehru, they produced Mahatma Gandhi, they also produced Jinnah, they produced Indian nationalism. They also made space for the emergence of Indian Congress Party. So all these institutions were created due to the exercise of power of the colonizers. And ultimately, these institutions created counter discourse. And with the help of this counter discourse, that is the people of this subcontinent, dropped them out of the territory of this subcontinent. And it became independent in 1907. Actually, this is a very common process. It's a very simultaneous process of exercising of power and the emergence of knowledge. These two incidents are very simultaneous. They occur simultaneously. Similarly, the colonizers brought their languages to Africa, and those languages were used by the colonized, and they wrote their own history in the language of the colonizers. And they told the world that the history or the version of history produced by the colonizers was nothing but a distortion of their history. But the version produced by the local writers, the version of the history produced by the local writers, was the true version. So this is just like the thing that we find with Caliban in the Tempest. That is, Caliban was taught the language of Prospero. And what was his benefit? His benefit was that he could curse Prospero in his own language. This is called the exercise of power and the generation of knowledge that we find in Michel Foucault's Archaeology of Knowledge. Okay. And Foucault has said that history is not only a narrative, history is a system. Knowledge is not an abstract ingredient of human life. Knowledge is a system. A book or a text is not only a combination of a few pages of paper. A book is a system. So all these systems, while are at the hands of the colonizers, they attempt to dehumanize the local people. They attempt to fossilize the culture of the local people. They attempt to transform the local people into nowhere. But in course of time, the local people encounter the advent of colonial process or colonial diplomacy or colonial hypocrisy, and they write back. This is said by Bill Ashcroft, Helen Tiffin, and Gareth Griffith. These three professors of Australian universities wrote a book in 1989. The name of the book is The Empire Write Back. So how does the empire write back? The empire writes back by using the language of the imperialists, by using the language of the colonizers, by using the epistemology of the colonizers, by using the way of looking at things introduced by the colonizers. This is called the empire writes back. So things fall apart is a text belonging to this project of writing back the empire, and it was produced in 1958. And while this text was produced, it was not accepted well by the Western world. Even in local market, this book did not sell well. But in course of time, the people could understand that this very text is an instrumental text of African literature, highlighting African knowledge, African epistemology, African belief system, African system of power structure, and African way of seeing the whole world, African ideology. So while the people could discover the power of this text began to achieve a celebrated status in international readership and in local readership. So Things Fall Apart is undoubtedly a classic African text. Now, if you think of the title of this text, Things Fall Apart, I think you are well acquainted with this phrase. And this phrase occurs in the poem The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. W.B. Yeats wrote this poem in 1918 during the First World War. And Yeats, in that very poem, described the situation of the present world, that is, the world during the First World War. And he looked around and found that only anarchy was going on. That was not the proper trait or feature of human civilization. And Yeats also said that human civilization began with the birth of Jesus Christ. I think it's a blunder that Yeats had made deliberately. I do never want to say that Yeats was ignorant about the history of the world. Yeats was well aware of the history of the world, but he could not come out of the stereotype produced or imposed by the colonizers upon him. Though he himself was also colonized, he was an Irish, and the Irish people were colonized by the British rulers for many, many years. Even then, he was a part of the colonizers because he received education from London. He wrote in English language. So he could not free himself from the stereotype of the colonizers. And Yeats, in that very poem, I request you to recite the poem again today, and you will find that Yeats has said that before the birth of Jesus Christ, human civilization was compared to the stony sleep. Stony sleep, a kind of hibernation, a kind of inactivity, a kind of passivity. That is, Yeats means to say that history began with the birth of Jesus Christ from Jerusalem. That is, with the birth of Christianity. So he is very much optimistic that Christianity would again come and Christianity would be the only power of salvation. Christianity would be the only tool of salvation for humankind. Actually, Chinua Achebe has marked this very deliberate politics of Yeats or the European colonizers in literature. If you go back to human civilization, you will find that human civilization began millenniums or centuries and millenniums ago, before the birth of Jesus Christ. 50,000 years ago, agriculture originated in Africa. And civilization started with the invention of agriculture. So how can you say that civilization started only with the birth of Jesus Christ? So Jesus Christ was a kind of tool or weapon or apparatus in the hands of the colonizers. And with Jesus Christ, they colonized the whole world. And if you look at the statue of Jesus Christ, you will find a Europeanized appearance of Jesus Christ. So far, I believe you have seen the picture or portrait of Jesus Christ. You have also seen different statues of Jesus Christ in front of different churches, especially Catholic churches. You will find that Jesus Christ has been imposed with a Europeanized appearance. He looks like a European, but we know that Jesus Christ was born in Jerusalem. He is not an European. He's not a European. He's an Arabian. Okay, he was born in Jerusalem. But Jesus Christ, whom we meet today, is given Europeanized appearance. This is a politics. So Jesus Christ is a tool in the hands of the colonizers. And with that very tool, they tried to colonize, dehumanize, and fossilize the culture, identity, and location of the natives of different parts of the world. So Chinua Achebe in Things Fall Apart has used the phrase "things fall apart" from the text, The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. Actually, this is a kind of writing back. It is a kind of the process of writing back. That is Jesus. That is, things fall apart means as in during the First World War, there is only anarchy all around. So to bring back or to bring about harmony in the modern world, according to W.B. Yeats, Christianity is essential. That is, Jesus Christ is essential. But Chinua Achebe believes that this very Jesus Christ or this very Christianity is a tool in the hands of the colonizers to dehumanize the people of the world. So this is a great irony. And Chinua Achebe can identify, can diagnose this deliberate politics of the Western texts, literary texts. Western literary texts were also used as a kind of weapon or apparatus to dehumanize the people of the other parts of the world beyond Europe. That is, Europe is self, and the people living beyond Europe are called other. So this otherization process or the mission of otherization was accelerated, was geared up by the concept, by the ideas and ideology of Christianity and Jesus Christ. That very hollowness of Christianity, that very hollowness of European civilizing mission was diagnosed by Chinua Achebe. And that very potent discovery by Chinua Achebe is exposed through the choice of this title. So things fall apart. This very phrase criticizes the Western politics of otherization of Africa and other parts of the world. And at the same time, this phrase is also used to show, ironically, how Christianity was responsible for the things fall apart like situation in Africa. W.B. Yeats, in his poem, has said that for bringing about harmony or for correcting the things fall apart like situation, we need Christianity or we need Jesus Christ. This is the message of W.B. Yeats in Things Fall Apart. But Chinua Achebe in Things Fall Apart novel has said that this Christianity or this Jesus Christ, this ideology of Christianity is mostly responsible for things fall apart like situation in Africa. So this is the thing that you must know. You need not celebrate W.B. Yeats without knowing the fact. You have to be critical. You must critically judge these things, and you have to take resort to theories if you want to unmask the hypocritical roles and hypocritical appearance of the colonizers. Now I like to tell you about the characters of this text, as it is my second class with you on this particular text. I like to introduce you to the characters of this text. It is a novel, and you know that this novel is written in English language. English is not a mother tongue of Chinua Achebe. Achebe is an Igbo. That is, Igbo is a community in Africa or ethnic group in Africa. And Igbo speak their own language. That very language is also called Igbo language. Igbo language is very rich. It is rich in idioms. It is rich in mythology or myths. It is also rich in proverbs. The Igbos are very much sagacious people. They are wise people. Their sense of culture, their sense of cultural identity is very sharp. And it is said that the Igbos speak their language with effect. Now, how do they produce this effect? They produce this effect of their language by using proverbs and idioms. And in the second page of this text, Things Fall Apart, you will get this very statement that the Igbos speak Igbo language in association with their proverbs as they take palm oil with their food. So proverbs, idioms, then myths are very inevitable parts of Igbo language. And Chinua Achebe used to speak Igbo language. But we also know that Chinua Achebe's parents were converted Christians. His father was a churchman. So Chinua Achebe, from the very beginning of his life, had an opportunity to go to the missionary school and he learned English there. He spoke English language and at the same time he spoke Igbo language. Actually, he was located in the crossroad of two different languages and two different cultures. In my last lecture, I told you that Chinua Achebe used to go to the church on Sundays with his father and mother to perform Christian prayer. And again, on the other days of the week, he used to accompany his other relatives who were pagans to the temples and worship their gods and goddesses. Actually, this is undoubtedly an exceptional characteristic that we find with Chinua Achebe. Achebe could accommodate different ideas, different pantheons, different ideologies in a single mind. And that very power or ability of accommodation has enabled him to produce this classic novel. He is not confined in the stereotype of Africanism or Afrocentric attitude. He is not confined in this stereotype. Many of the writers or many of the Africans are confined in these stereotypes and they could not represent or they could not be representative writers of Africa. Chinua Achebe could be the representative writer of Africa. Why? Because of this ability to bring about a synthesis between differences or different cultures, different languages, different modes of life and modes of life. This is Chinua Achebe's specialty. Now, we like to know the characters of this text. We know that this text is about the cultural conflict. I just like to tell you in brief, in a few sentences. about the subject matter of this text. That is Okonkwo, who we find here, the Okonkwo, the protagonist of this text, things fall apart, and he is also one of the leaders of his clan. And in course of time, he was very happy. Towards the very beginning of this novel, we get a very happy picture of Okonkwo. He is happy with his wives. We know that polygamy was a very common practice in Africa. So he had several wives and he was living with his wives and children happily. Though polygamy was a common practice, one thing that you have to mark that with all the wives and children, Okonkwo used to live in a single compound. This characteristic shows that the Africans were united. Though there was the practice of polygamy, though an African man had several wives and several children, they used to live in a single compound. So it proves that how united they were. So Okonkwo was happy. He also led the judiciary of the community. But very unfortunately, the white men or white missionaries came to the village, Umofia. The name of the village is Umofia. I just like to tell you about the setting of this text that this text sets in two different villages. One is Umofia and the other is Mubanta. Umofia is the village of Okonkwo, and Mubanta is the village of Okonkwo's mother, where his maternal uncle Uchendu lives. And a very significant episode of his life, Okonkwo passed in Mubanta. We know that in a funeral ceremony, Okonkwo by mistake shot a bullet from his gun, and the bullet hit a young man. And in African culture, especially in Igbo culture, killing a kinsman was a great sin. It's a punishable offense. So Okonkwo was to go through self-banishment. He went to Mubanta along with all the members of his family, and he had to live there for 7 years. And during his absence from his village, the missionaries came to his village, Umofia, and they started their mission of converting the people into Christians. And the most tragic incident of the life of Okonkwo was that his own son Noe was also a converted Christian. He was converted into a Christian. He left his father's side and went to the missionary. And he took the job of a teacher. After receiving education of the missionaries, he took up the job of a teacher there. But ultimately, Okonkwo was not ready to tolerate, or he was not ready to let all these things happen smoothly. He wanted to maintain the sanctity of his culture and cultural heritage. He wanted to uphold his own culture above everything. That very intention or that very purpose of upholding his own culture above everything made him cruel. That is, very cruelly, one day he cut off the head of a court messenger. And for that reason, he had to hang himself because he found that nobody was with him. No clansman was with him. Nobody of his clan supported him. So he found that he was alone. And he could also discover how Christianity disintegrated the people, how Christianity sowed the seed of bitterness among the Igbos. So that very discovery gave him an impression that all his struggle, all his wrestling, or all his attempt of bringing about unity among the people was in vain. So the discovery of his failure ultimately led him to commit suicide. So Okonkwo committed suicide at the end of this novel. And with his suicide, the novel ends. Actually, this is the long and short of this uh, novel. in brief. Now I like to tell you about these characters. Okonkwo. Okonkwo is the protagonist and very influential leader. And we know that in his childhood, he was not happy because his father, Unoka, was a lazy man. He did not take care of his family. He was not potent enough to carry on the responsibility of the family. So Okonkwo was not satisfied with his father. And Okonkwo, after his father's death, did not inherit anything. So he was a man left with nothing. But with his struggle, with his determination, or with his unbroken personality, fortitude, he attained everything. He became one of the richest men in his clan, and he also became one of the leaders of his clan. This is Okonkwo. But Okonkwo has got a very fatal drawback of his character. He is very angry and aggressive. When he became angry, he could not control himself. And we know that that very particular trait of his character, that very particular disposition of his character, led him to further troubles and ultimate humiliation. The Noe is the son of Okonkwo. He is the eldest son of Okonkwo, but Okonkwo is not happy with Noe. He thinks that Noe is not sufficiently masculine, and Noe is lazy, and he also finds the reflection of his lazy father Unoka in the character of Noe. And this Noe ultimately was converted into a Christian. He left his father's family and joined the missionary. That was a very fatal blow on the character, on the mind, on the dream of Okonkwo. Then we meet another character, Ezinma. Ezinma is the daughter of Okonkwo, and Ezinma's mother was Ekwefi. Ekwefi was Okonkwo's second wife. And Ezinma was very responsible. She was affectionate to her father. And Okonkwo very often thought that Ezinma should have been a boy. So why? Because Ezinma had some special characteristics that he did not find in the character of Noe. For that reason, he always imagined, he always hoped that Ezinma should have been a boy. Then Ikemefuna. Ikemefuna is a very unfortunate boy. And towards the very beginning of this novel, you will find that the neighboring locality and the village Eumofia, these two localities, were set in enmity. So why? Because a woman from Eumofia was killed by a man from that very neighboring village. Then Okonkwo and other elders went to that village for bringing about reconciliation. And as per the rule, as a part of the compensation, that very locality offered this boy Ikemefuna to Umofia. And they also offered a beautiful virgin girl as a part of compensation, because the lady who was killed was a wife of man. So that very girl would marry that very man as a part of compensation, and the boy would live in Umofia. And while the situation would favor, the boy would be sacrificed in the altar of the god. So that was the ritual. So Ikemefuna was taken to Umofia, and that very boy used to live with the family of Okonkwo. And he lived in Okonkwo's family for 3 years. And after 3 years, he was killed. That is, he was sacrificed. Okonkwo himself killed him. Though Okonkwo was strictly forbidden to kill the boy because the boy called him father, but Okonkwo, only to prove that he was not as weak as his father Unoka, or he was not like an Agbala, that is a woman, only to prove his masculinity, he killed this boy with his own hands. And that very killing impacted a very fatal impact upon Novi. And we know that after this incident, Novi left the family of Okonkwo and he joined the missionary. Then Mr. Brown, a Christian missionary, he was a Christian father and he was very sympathetic with the local people. Though he went on with his mission of going on with Christianity or spreading Christianity or preaching Christianity, sermonizing among the people, he was not very cruel. He was very much accommodative and he was very much affectionate to the people of the village. Then, after his departure, Mr. James Smith came. He was also a missionary, but he was quite opposite to Mr. Brown, and he did not believe in exercising affection upon the people. He believed in exercising force upon the people. He was very uncompromising. And during his time, there were troubles, unexpected troubles,